Okay. It crashed on me. Okay. Oh, hello again. Sorry, the first recording of it crashed on me, and yeah. So anyway, let's try this again. Hopefully, it doesn't crash on me again. Anyway, we are going to be reading chapters 19 to 21 of Straight On Till Morning by Liz Braswell, the twisted Disney fairy tale of what if Wendy went to Neverland with the pirates instead of Peter Pan. A little short recap. Um, short recap. We found out that Captain Hook was meeting with this witch who allowed, who gave Captain Hook something to use to make the shadow that Wendy traded for transportation to Neverland with Captain Hook. And now Captain Hook has something to use the shadow to make it into like a compass to lead him to Peter Pan. Um, so there's that. We also found out, or we also read that um, Wendy and Tinkerbell are now traveling in this jungle, which is a very dangerous jungle, but it's the only way that they can go. Basically, this jungle is dangerous not only because of the creatures that live within it, but it's dangerous for Tinkerbell because there are creatures there is a creature inside of the jungle that does eat fairies, um, and it's attracted to the light that that they have around their bodies. However, they need to be able to find who knows where the first were. And a recap on the first are described kind of like how God is described in the Christian Bible. This being that created Earth, that created life on Earth, whether through plants and animals and all that sort of thing. That's basically how the first were described. They were the first beings to um, be in the space that Neverland is, and they made Neverland as the Neverland we have been reading. Um, that sort of deal. Anyway, Tinkerbell did this little dance to lure out some other fairies, and she did lure out another female fairy and a male fairy. They kind of made fun of her for living alone with a bunch of humans, and they were trying to get her to go back to live with the fairies, but she was like, "Nah, nah, I'm cool. I'm cool with that." Which, like, girl, same. But anyway. Wow, I've been talking for like 4 minutes. Jesus. Okay. Um. Anyway, they told her um, where the first were last seen, or where their last location is known. Uh, the reason they have to find out where their last location was because the first don't really stay in one spot. They travel a lot around Neverland. So after getting that information, Tinkerbell and Wendy decided that they are going to go to that location to see if they could find the first, find Peter Pan, or find a trace of where they could have went to. Um, and then chapter 18 ended with Tinkerbell being attacked by one of these creatures that eats fairies. So we're gonna get into that, and I'm gonna do it again. let's get started. Chapter 19. The Primal. Primal. That's how I'm gonna pronounce it. Because it's not a real word, so the primal. It was all predator, sleek and slimy and black and lithe. Its paws had claws, long curled half moons that easily ripped through the fairy's dress and closed around her waist. Without thinking, Wendy threw herself at it, grasping at the beast with her own hands, naked, pink, and clawless. One would suppose that after her experiences in Neverland, she might stop and think twice about engaging a strange creature, an unknown entity who might have had any number of unpredictable and magical attacks. But the thing's closest approximation to any London beast was Cat, an angry, starving alley cat, fierce but not indomitable. Wendy had her share of experiences with those, ranging from pulling them off hapless songbirds to begging her parents to let her keep one. And in fact, the twin mirrors on the front of his snub face could have been mistaken for a cat's eyes, with a light shining into them. Down! Wendy cried imperiously. Her hands closed tightly around its middle, but it didn't yowl as she expected. It dropped the fairy in shock, then sort of thinned out between Wendy's fingers. The creature slid through them like oil, dripped to the ground, and reformed into a Weasley mink-like creature. Ugh! Wendy looked at her hands, but they were clean, and all she had actually felt was the soft fur one would expect. With barely a pause, the creature found Tinker Bell and again leapt on her. The little fairy was a bit stunned and shaken up by its first attack. She was still on the ground and stumbling. She emitted exactly half a jingle wail before it had body slammed her, smashing her straight down into the ground. I said, get off! Wendy cried. She grabbed the first stick she saw, and though usually opposed to violence toward animals, whacked the criminal as hard as she could on its side. It rolled out of the way, but kept its claws around Tinker Bell, the fairy close to its belly. Then it jumped upright on its four paws and laughed. You, you, when he stammered, indignant. It really was. The whole thing was laughing at her, chuckling and wobbling. It bent its head and linked Tinker Bell with an ugly gray forked tongue. It smacked its mouth. It is like some Tom and Jerry nasty bull. Mindy brought the stick down as hard as she could on its head. It easily leapt out of her reach, landing on the side of a tree. From this from this new perch it shoved one more time back at Wendy before scuttling up like a lizard onto its branches. No! Wendy dropped her stick and grabbed the trunk of the tree. Come back! Come back! Come back! Come down here this instant! She shook the tree as hard as she could, expecting disappointment. But the tree was a slender tropical thing, whose body was far more lithe and pile, 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 Listen, I've been stuttering all day. Oh, ple, 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 ple. This word is only like 5 letters. I can't say it. What the heck is wrong with me? Pliable? I think that's what it is. Okay. Pliable than its London counterparts. It swayed easily under her efforts, and its long leafy fronds clattered and clashed satisfyingly. The creature fell and hit the ground with an equally satisfying whomp. Take! Wendy grabbed the creature's tail to yank it off the fairy, only its tail slid into nothing in her hands. Overpowered by the momentum she had created with nothing to balance it, Wendy fell back onto her bum. The creature looked back at her and chuffed again. Faint jingling sounds could be heard, pitifully, from under its stomach. The crumb wiggled its tail at Wendy and took off into the forest. Tinkerbell dangled from its mouth. The poor fairy jingled desperately as it disappeared into the bushes. No! Wendy got up and ran after her as fast as she could. Flying was out of the question. She wasn't an expert, and the understory of the jungle was far too dense for her to even consider it. And she already had a late start. The smaller, more lithe carnivore easily leapt over obstacles and slunk under them. Wendy also jumped over fallen trees and ducked under canopies of vines, trying to keep the thing in her sights, but she was much, much slower. The criminal was black as shadow, and made almost no noise as it flowed on the forest floor, just a pitter-patter and occasional chuff. She burst out into a hot clearing, an empty hilltop whose dry pinnacle could support little life. The sun beat down like a physical force. It was no longer a happy lemon. It was a blazing ball of fire. Wendy spun around looking for signs of the criminal, but the ground had dried and cracked mud that recorded no footprints. The edges around the outside of the clearing were staffed by half-dead, yellow trees that all looked the same. Excuse me. There was no hint of the creature. Tink! Wendy cried. Tink! Oh, she murmured, turning and turning. No! She cried again, but her voice fell flat and quiet in the thick, fitted air. Tinkerbell! She screamed, but the jungle was silent. Okay, that was actually kind of short, because we're already at chapter 9. No, I said 19. Chapter 20. Let's see. That was really short. Guess it's gonna be kind of a short stream then. Okay, this might be a bit of a short stream. Sorry. But I think I'm a bit too tired to try to read some more. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Depends on how this next one, chapter 21, goes. Alright. Chapter 20. A Shadow of a Doubt. There was a very thin line between panic and giving up. Wendy was filled with rage and terror, but also a split second away from collapsing on the ground and weeping. And that would be the end of everything. If she just started running in the wrong direction, she would merely continue in the wrong direction and get further and further from the creature and the fairy. If she retraced her steps looking for clues, she would be wasting time. The image came to her mind, ruthlessly unbidden. The black, formless creature biting down on the fairy's midriff, and the result. What the heck just happened to me? The resulting horrible crunch. There it is, Jesus. Tinkerbell! She screamed until her voice cracked. Nothing. Wendy choked back the sob and pulled at her hair. What to do? What would a hero do? What would Peter Pan do? What could she do? Where was the terribly clever Dos Ex Machina? or plot device that she would write for her own heroes. What sort of nightmare creature was that thing? That criminal, anyway? At least the crystalline guardian from before had made some sort of sense, pulled out of Michael's angry toddlerhood and a doll he had made out of clay. This animal was far too precise, too detailed for his young mind, and John would never have imagined something so horrible and vicious. Secretly, he loved fairies as much as Wendy, and delighted in designing the twig and acorn contraptions that were used to simplify the forest task. What sort of child would come up with a carnivorous beast that eats fairies, that hunts and devours and tears them apart? She wailed. But of course there were other children besides the darlings who believed in Neverland. Children who delighted in the destruction of fairies, who hated beauty, or who didn't believe beauty was possible, that only ugliness and horror survived. What kind of child were they? What were their lives like? Mindy shivered. What do I do? She whispered. What could she do? When there were monsters like these, and worse, roaming the fairy tale world she had thought was safe. That was when she noticed her shadow. The black shape was doing the equivalent of jumping up and down, elongating and contracting, still connected to Wendy's feet. She waved her arms frantically, trying to get Wendy's attention. What? What is it? The shadow bent down and pulled at her feet. Then she stretched her arms, making a flying gesture, and pointed into the woods. What do you... Oh, you want me to release you? So you can go look for Tinkerbell? The shadow nodded vigorously. You think you could find her? The shadow nodded again. But even if you found her, how can you help her until I get there? The shadow shook her head. No time. She pointed at their feet again. Oh, I suppose there isn't much of a choice, really, is there? The shadow nodded vigorously. Pages stuck it together. There we go. Wendy bent down, unsure what to do exactly. She placed her hands on her left foot and made as if to untie a boot. Something gave. Felt like something untied from her belly and slid out through her feet. A wave of nausea washed over her, leaving her enervated. I think that's what we're gonna deal with. Everything, even standing, seemed suddenly exhausting. It wasn't a simple thing to release one's shadow, Wendy realized. It wasn't all fun and games and a funny quest to reunite with it. The shadow, in Neverland at least, contained something besides a lack of light and mimicry of movement. Some very visceral part of Wendy was in her shadow, and when she let go, you will come back to me after you find her, right? She asked before reaching for her other foot. Shadow shrugged and shook her head. No time. No time to stop and think. No time to consider the ramifications. For Tinkerbell, Wendy told herself sternly, and untied her right foot. The shadow shot off out of the clearing and into the woods. Wendy slumped to the ground. Her energy and strength weren't all gone. She figured out after a few silent moments. She could still move and still stand up with a little effort. It was more like she didn't really care. It's like I have the chills, or cold, but of the soul, she said aloud to cheer herself up. Nothing so very serious. Manageable. Peter has done without a shadow for 4 years. Certainly I can go an hour. She did a few stretches and was satisfied with the way her body responded. Weakly, but up to the task if pressed. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Tonight, Jesus. She just hoped her shadow was going to do what she said. But Wendy assumed she was saying what Wendy assumed she was saying. That she would go find Tinkerbell before it was too late, and somehow signal to Wendy. After all, despite whatever influence Neverland had, she was still Wendy's shadow. The shade of a good, well-meaning, honest girl. Must be a little good herself, unless all of Wendy's worst behaviors were contained in her shadow, like her betrayal of Peter Pan. Let's go keep reminding herself of that, goddamn. Wendy had a few long minutes of pondering these oppressive thoughts, but before she even thought it was possible, there came a strange and ominous crashing in the woods, as if something was being flayed wildly back and forth, thrown into the bushes, picked up and thrown again. And was that the faintest jingle? Think about it. Wendy made her feet move in the direction the sounds were coming from as quickly as she could manage. She often had to stop, pause to listen, run the wrong way for a moment, trip over a plant, then turn the right way again, at least 7 times. The way all heroes do when chasing through the woods on a rescue mission. What the? You know what? You know what? You know what? We're gonna pause really quick. We are going to do a pause. No. Stay hydrated. Excuse me. Gotta stay hydrated at night. Alright, resuming. Like all good heroes, she eventually found her quarry, but the scene made no sense at all when she first came upon it. Oh, excuse me. There it is, excuse me. The criminal seemed to be throwing itself around violently. It growled, shook its head, leapt head first into a tree, then flowed down its trunk, and then began the whole thing over again, like a dog with hydrophobia. Tinkerbell was still clutched in his paws. Wendy crept up quietly, but it didn't seem to see her at all. When she accidentally stepped on a twig and snapped it, then the creature leapt up, alert, looking the wrong way. Carefully, unsure what was going on, Wendy came up behind it as silently as she could, as close as she could. She grabbed it by the nape of its neck, swinging it around quickly before it could flow out of her grasp. She seized its stomach with the other hand. She had to keep tossing it from hole to hole so it couldn't use its tricky thinning out powers to escape. The thing yowled and growled and hissed and batted out with its hind legs. It snapped its jaws wildly in all wrong directions. Something strange was going on with its mirror eyes. They looked dull and unseen. Wendy tore Tinkerbell out of its grasp, and then slammed the criminal into the ground, perhaps harder than was strictly necessary. Tink, are you all right? She held the crumbled and bruised little fairy up for a better look. Tinkerbell nodded woefully. She was bleeding, but not from the giant punctures Wendy had expected from the creature's jaws. More like scratches from being shaken around while in his grasp. It was taking me back to his lair. They don't like fresh fairy meat. Oh, Wendy said, swallowing. The criminal stood up woozily, swaying and sick. A black mist, no, shadow, peeled itself off its face. Wendy's shadow had covered his eyes, using herself as a mask. The animal shook its head and blinked its eyes back to their normal set. Jesus, shiny silver. It gave Wendy a wounded, irritated look. Wendy, pulling a Tinkerbell, stuck out her tongue at it. The grandma leapt away into the underbrush and disappeared as fast as it could, this time without a single snarky chuff. Wendy's shadow triumphantly unfolded herself and stood tall, hands on hips. Her toes touched Wendy's, and the human girl could feel energy and strength pour back into her. That was very clever, Wendy crowed. You blinded him. Oh, very clever indeed. The shadow bowed, then she saluted, and then she took off, disappeared into the woods like the criminal, but high, into the branches of the canopy layer. Wendy stumbled, but didn't quite fall. I suppose I should have expected that, she muttered. No one helps for free around here. Tinkerbell, despite her wounds, looked up at the human girl with pity and concern. That was brave and noble, giving up your shadow for me. Thank you. Well, what else is there to do, really? Wendy asked, a little more tiredly than she wanted. After the way I treated you. I mean, that's a fair point, Wendy said with a faint smile. You're welcome. I don't deserve it. You can't go back to London now. What? The human girl asked, startled. Well, that was interesting, at least. She could still feel panic, though muted in her shadowless state. You can't return home without your shadow. But why? Peter left his own shadow in London, and he returned here. Peter is almost pixie. You are entirely human. Shadows are different here. They are less of a requirement than they are in London. The rules of your world are very strict about that sort of thing. I'm sorry. But I didn't want to go back to London, Wendy protested. It was a little bit of a lie. She had always thought she would return, otherwise she wouldn't have insisted on a return ticket from the pirates. And now that it looked like that option was taken away, she was suddenly a lot more concerned about it. Never see Michael and John again. Mother and father, Nana, even the evil old Seasbro twins, the smokestacks, the roofs, the clouds. Tinkerbell seemed to read her mind. You gave up a lot for me. More than you knew. Well, I can't think about any of that for now, Wendy told Tinkerbell, and herself, firmly. Before anything else, we must rescue Peter's shadow and save Neverland. I can't go home until everyone here is safe. So let us continue to make our way to the Chanting Peninsula. Are you well enough to travel? Tinkerbell looked at her with wonder. She nodded once. And is it very far away? Because I'm afraid to admit it, but I'm a bit done in. All these adventures really wear a girl out. Dying to sleep. Wendy was very, very shaky, in fact. But she ground her teeth and tried to sound as blasé as possible. The loss of her shadow made all her aches and pains and tiredness worse, exact opposite of the fairy dust. Sleep on the way. That's what we do. And although the idea of the tiny winged creatures leaping high in the sky with clouds for their cushions was positively delightful, Wendy couldn't see herself doing it without heading directly into a thunderhead, or a cliff, or the mouth of some sort of horrid Neverland creature. Think about it. I don't think I could. I'd be terrified of falling or smashing into something. Tinkerbell smiled. Go to sleep. I'll watch you. Are you certain? I won't be afraid if you really will keep an eye on me. Sorry about being such a terrible burden. Big, ugly human alone. Utterly useless. Tinkerbell opened her mouth, and out came great peals of strange, jingly laughter. Then she grabbed Wendy's hand and pulled her aloft into the darkening sky. Okay, chapter 21. Again, this stream is going to be really short. I usually do like hour-long streams, but this one probably going to be less than that. Or not, if I keep drinking water breaks. I got some more water. Hey. Alright, so once again, after chapter 21, which is what we're on right now, I will decide if I want to read another chapter and do chapter 22. It doesn't look like I am, though. But we'll see. We'll see. Alright, chapter 21. The first. The next few hours were strange. Or maybe it was a day, or a half day, or two. A glorious sunset performed its final bows over Neverland. Dark purple clouds rolled out along a horizon edged in fiery orange, so bright it was like nothing. It was like looking into the depths of a blacksmith's forge. The first stars were entering with some confusion into the not quite black sky. It was delightful to see them floating in a sea of turquoise ether. How often do they get to do that? Wendy wondered aloud tiredly. Tinkerbell kept rising up and up into the sky, then pausing, then dipping down, then going sideways, and then repeating the whole procedure. Excuse me. Excuse me. Jesus, stop. Wendy had just summoned enough energy to ask her what she was doing when, with a bright look of satisfaction, the fairy apparently found whatever she was looking for and dragged the human girl through the air to her. Aha! Wendy suddenly realized what the invisible object of her friend's search was. A calm thermal wind. It was so large and encompassing that when she slipped into its embrace, the howling breezes of the upper airs immediately became silent, as if in the presence of a king. Here it was surprisingly warm, and scented with things that didn't seem to come from the jungles of Neverland. Exotic, but somehow familiar, like Mrs. Darling's perfume as she kissed her daughter before going out. Wendy had no trouble at all curling up on this invisible bed, and sleep came quickly despite the confusing scene she saw before languorous blinks. Lang, lang, Languorous blinks, I think. Instead of crisp sheets, comforting fire, and downy quilt, she saw nothing but empty space, sharp mountains, and trees 1,000 feet below. But not even these could keep her from unconsciousness. She drifted, literally and figuratively, the whole night, Tinkerbell always close by. One time, the little creature took a sit down on her, laying back on the big girl's shoulder and watching the stars. Mindy remained silent, and as still as she could, reluctant to disturb her. Eventually, the fairy woke Wendy with a big tug on her ear, back to her usual naughty tricks. But as the human girl started, indignant, she saw that the sun was close to rising. More importantly, the fairy held a rather ridiculously sized ruby fruit to break her fast with. These were the fruits that heroes stranded on a desert island in Wendy's stories always hoped to find to quench their thirst and save themselves from starvation. Wendy sat up as best she could on nothing. "Thank you. That's most kind." She took the ruby fruit and popped off the stem like she had in dreams. It fell neatly into 10 perfect juicy sections. "Would you like one?" When Tinkerbell shrugged nonchalantly, but took a section and immediately sank her face into its pale, creamy flesh, tearing out mouthfuls while somehow managing not to get any juice on her face. A delicate, civilized little beast. It was rather funny when Wendy thought about it. Despite Tinkerbell giving Wendy the gift of understanding fairy tongue, they had they had they had just had an entire conversation without the fairy speaking a single word. In fact, most of Tink's communications still seemed to be in gestures, facial expressions, and body movements. They weren't just affections or simply to enhance understanding for those who couldn't decipher jingles. This was really just how Tinkerbell spoke. When she ha- Lord have mercy. When she had to, she could be as articulate and verbose as anyone else, including other fairies who spoke clearly and wordily, and whose hands didn't move at all during discourse, like well-trained boarding school ladies. Tinkerbell's meaning was wrapped up in movement. She was energy and gesture. Wendy ate another piece of fruit and turned to watch the east. She wasn't normally fond of sunrises awake because she was barely awake when they occurred, and because they signaled the end of the peaceful quiet of the house. Others rose at that time, and Wendy had to deal with the various personalities and problems of the day that were outside her own head. Sunrises were never spectacular in London anyway, just a yellowish lightening of the fog, or, on a really clear day in autumn, a brightening of rare blue sky somewhere behind the rooftops. Perhaps in some neighborhood east of the Darlings' house, east of their street, east of the park, east and east and east, maybe someone at the edge of London saw the sun come up properly from behind something natural like the sea or a forest edge. But no one else did. Now, 2 days in a row, Wendy got to witness the real thing, Neverland style. First came the strange false dawn that presaged the sun's appearance, like the hopeful breath of an audience before a famous Shantu, I guess, steps out onto stage. Taking its own time, the lemony Neverland sun finally rose, and surprisingly hot for the morning, its first rays hitting Wendy's skin with an almost tangible pressure. Through all this, the air and the sunlight came a strange vibration. At first, Wendy's brain almost dismissed it, thoughtlessly categorizing the repeated drone as waves crashing on the shore. But the girls weren't low enough to hear any waves, and they weren't over a beach at all. So her mind tried to resolve the sounds into words or hums. Nom, 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 and strings of only slightly more complicated sounds. Tinkerbell saw her frowning and smiled. Chanting Peninsula, she jingled. Get it? Oh, yes! Not enchanted. The whole peninsula. Chant! It's amazing. But what what is it that makes the sound specifically? Tinkerbell shrugged, no longer interested in the questions or the subject. She pulled Wendy's sleeve and pointed down. Directly beneath them was the recognizable forest of Neverland. And there, just beyond it, was a blank wall. Clouds, gray and white and eggshell and beige and not and every not quite color in between, drifted over each other in unhealthy layers. Fingers of mist almost purposefully, spun out almost purposefully, ensnaring a tree or a rock, and then using that anchor to crawl along farther. Yet in other places, the mist stretched thin and snapped away from wherever it was before, revealing seemingly untouched foliage and landscape beneath it. Wendy wasn't sure what she expected. Dead land? Changed, unfamiliar objects? But was nevertheless surprised. The magical fog moved on without altering anything in its wake. It didn't look harmless. Inside the mist itself, however, something seemed not quite right. There were signs of pale brown or orange within ochre, with or, with ochre, I guess. Some surface that reflected light, not from the sun, but was now twinkling over Neverland. A different star, perhaps? Dun color and morose? Wendy shivered. The pirates were frightening. The crystal gardener, the, the crystal gardener. Wow, Wolf. Seriously? The crystal guardian was murderous, and the mermaids were surprisingly hostile. But this was a hint of the completely unknowable, and far, far more terrifying. Tinkerbell pointed down and began to descend, spiraling like a drill. But why? Wendy asked, coming somewhat clumsily after her, skirts flying up to into her face as she desperately tried to hold them against her thighs. Can't we just skim low under the fog and search for Peter that way? One does not simply fly into the land of the first. I don't suppose it should have been that easy, Wendy said with a sigh. She landed fairly elegantly and slowly, she thought, touching her tippy toes down to the ground. First, hang on, hang on, hang. Yeah, okay. Touching her tippy toes down to the ground, first the way Tinkerbell did. The two girls reluctantly regarded the strange, unwholesome smog before them as it coiled around itself like the intertwined bodies of mythic serpents. Yormaganda, or perhaps Ouroboros. Tell me you watch people play. uh, excuse me, I'm getting sleepy. Though Wendy could not have possibly known it, the fairy and the human had the exact same expression on their faces: wonder, distrust, false bravery. Tinkerbell tentatively reached a tiny bubble-decorated toe into the mist, and then quickly pulled it out. I don't want to suggest anything untoward, Wendy said after a full moment's hesitation. But since you said one shouldn't fly here, well, if you don't think it's beneath you, perhaps you wouldn't object to riding, rather, on my shoulder? That way we will be on equal footing, together, and with whatever comes at us. Also, you wouldn't be lost, or stepped on, or... But the fairy was already zooming up to her neck. She perched daintily on the crook of Wendy's shoulder, and held on to a lock of brown hair. But less like reins than more for balance and possible security, she did not tug. Very well, then, Wendy said, lifting her chin and trying to muster bravado and dignity appropriate to the moment, and to disguise how tickled she was at the closeness of the fairy, despite their circumstances. She could just feel the tiniest weight on his skin, and the occasional brief of in the occasional brief heat of a speck of fairy dust. Together, they entered the mist. The first thing that struck Wendy was how it felt nothing at all like she had expected. The clouds were neither damp, nor moist, nor cold. They were hot, and somehow drier than the land around them. Yet they didn't smell of smoke or smog or anything burning. Strange noises streamed past her ears, whispers she couldn't quite make out, the distant echo of something very large pounding off in the forest, a rhythmic beat whose direction she couldn't put her finger on. Then the flat yellow, white, and gray entirely surrounded her, masking the world. There was no distance or perspective. She closed her eyes and tried to put her feet in the same direction she had been heading. There was nothing else to do, and since nothing was touching her, there was no immediate threat to worry about. After some period of time, she couldn't quite keep track of the whispers quieted. She opened her eyes. Like tears after a good cry, the mist quickly dried and disappeared, or perhaps they rose up, joining the uncolored sky to make a complete dome of gray and beige around everything. They stood in what appeared to be very much a desert. Wendy, of course, had never seen one in real life, but had read enough adventure novels and explorers' narratives to recognize one when she saw it. Sadly, the ground was not quite as dramatic as the sands of Egypt were described. Not an endless ocean of dunes and ripples, solid waves and particulate shores. There was sand, but it was gritty white here, and streaked with yellow there, broken up with a band of gray beyond that, and red, 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 where the far-off ruby cliffs seemed to dissolve under their own weight into the floor of the planet. There was also rocks strewn about everywhere, untidily. Tiny rocks like pebbles, large rocks like you might build a wall out of, but in all the wrong shapes and colors. Perfectly black rounded rocks scattered randomly among the rest for no good reason. Countless flat, flaking red rocks that made more sense than the red-tinged landscape. Keeping close to the ground were strange little plants, and though Wendy generally didn't like imposing subjective opinions on defenseless inanimate objects, they were quite ugly. Dang, girl. She should have called a plant ugly. Thorny, narrow twigged, bunched up tight. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thorny, narrow twigs bunched up tight and miserably with leaves of dull colors. Some of them looked dead, but apparently weren't. There wasn't a single normal cactus among them. No barrels with spikes, no tall ones with rounded branches like letters from another language. There's a point. This girl just dissed plants. She just dissed the mess out of some plants, bro. And then there were tall, strange boulders that stood by themselves, spires or pinnacles dotting the landscape like bowling pins set up by a giant toddler. They were higher than buildings, but narrow, their bodies stripped with layers of red and white and tan like half-sucked peppermint canes, 100 years old and yellow with age. A dead wind blew, so dry it burned Wendy's nostrils. Sand got in her eyes, and it wasn't even normal sand. The pretty round and faceted jewels of a good English beach. It was more like dust, tiny slippery flakes that soon found their way into every crease and crevice of her clothes and person. As for the rest of the land, from her squinted eyes, Wendy saw further than she ever had. Her brain hurt tried to make some sort of sense of the images it received. At home, even outside the city, there was always houses blocking the view, and trees and hills. Every couple of miles, something like a hedge cut off one's view of the rest of the world. Here, she could see for what appeared to be 50 miles in every direction, maybe 100, with no real end but for the ability of her eyes. She felt dizzy, utterly exposed under such a huge, bright, dead sky, an endless flat desert, with its weird chest-like rock figures, its unmeasurable walls of red rock and distant plateaus. There was nothing else. She herself was nothing. She didn't even have her shadow. Wendy collapsed to her knees, overcome by it all. "Careful!" Tinkerbell exhorted, buzzing up off her shoulder for a moment before remembering not to fly. "You're going to get all sticky and mucky." "Mucky?" Wendy asked hastily. "Are you joking? Tinkerbell, are you feeling all right? Is the heat getting to you?" "Heat? It's cold and nasty and wet with all the mud bubbling up everywhere." "Mud?" Wendy looked around. "All I see is a desert. Miles and miles of empty desert. What do you see?" The fairy shifted uncomfortably on her shoulder. "I just told you. Mud. A world, a whole world of it. A giant, flat, dead world, mud bubbling up. Nothing." "I wonder which one of us is right," Wendy muttered. "Do you think it's some sort of trap? Some way of disguising themselves? Of keeping us from finding them in Peter? An illusion? Like fairy glamour?" "They are the most powerful beings in Neverland. They are Neverland," Tinkerbell jingled darkly. "No need for an illusion." "How does this place usually appear? Have you seen it before?" "Those who return never say. And no." "Well," Wendy bit her lip, "even words allowed here, Even words spoken aloud here sounded thin and deadless and useless. If it's real at all, at least what I can see from where I stand, there's no sign of Peter anywhere, or anything living. You? Nothing. Mud. Hmm. Hold on then. We'll walk a bit and see if we see anything or anyone. Let's just take a good look at where we started so we can remember. She forced herself back up on her feet and looked behind them. To her relief, the air, or reality, seemed to ripple. Shreds of white and gray blew aside, and the desert petered out. Glimpses of the dark green jungle peeped from beyond. "Oh, good," she said, turning back the way they were headed. "We can always return. We shall mark our place with those 3 rocks here, and oh!" Not 20 feet from them, there was nothing but scrub before, stood a giant monolith, a red and orange jagged-edged hobo, reaching high into the sky. Who, Hudo? So that says Hudo. I said hobo. I'm sorry. I'm like, what the heck is a hobo doing? Oh my god. Its top was worn into 3 strange and slightly bulbous shapes. With just a little imagination, Wendy could make out heads and maybe faces, blank, Pomodoro ones. "Tinkerbell," she whispered. "What do you see?" "Mud welling up, bubbling up into 3 ugly mud statues, sweating and bleeding and oozing mud." Wendy was only a little relieved that she and her friend were both seeing different versions of what appeared to be the same thing. The stone effigy in front of her was terrifying in every way, in its size, silence, and sudden appearance. "Why are you here?" Nothing spoke. Nothing that looked like a head or a face moved. No sound emerged, yet the words reverberated across the dead landscape, echoing and unmistakable. There could be no doubt where it came from. "If you please," Wendy dropped into a small curtsy. "We're here in search of our friend, Peter Pan. Have you seen him?" Silence. Terrible, dreadful silence. It, too, echoed, blanketing the desert with a deadly finality. Wendy waited and waited. The dry wind blew past her ear. She felt Tinkerbell grow tense, tiny fingernails digging into her skin, not urging her to do anything, just nervous. "I'm sorry," she began after a while. "Peter Pan, have you seen him? He's about my size and wears green." "Peter Pan was here. Now he is gone." "Ah, do you know when he left? Or where he went to? Did you give him a new shadow?" One too many questions. One question too many. Despite the lack of change in the landscape, Wendy could feel his impatience. "The problems of the boy are not our concern. We sent him away. Why are you here? You are not from Neverland. You are older." "I beg your forgiveness if I am too old to be allowed here," Wendy said, immediately lowering her head. "I shall leave as soon as I help my friend here find her friend, and help him get his shadow back, and defeat the pirates with whatever they're planning." There was a strange noise, as if the air was shaking. "Age is no rule of ours. It is a law created by you humans from the other side. We make no laws. We make no rules. We just are. It is humans who seek to name and regulate and shape this land to their ridiculous whims. Our world is crystallizing to the point of permanence thanks to your ridiculous dreaming. I don't understand. Once we and the world were one. We were the world. Then humans came. Their dreams were simple at first, but soon came the rules and the laws and the ideas and the suppositions and the feelings and the wishes and the decisions and the hopes. With each one another mountain hardened and another sea narrowed into a river. Now you have your Neverland. And because children's dreams are the strongest, their dreams rule the world. Everywhere except for here, where we still rule. We, the first of this world. Oh, but isn't it all rather lovely? Wendy asked. Fairies and mermaids, despite their vicious tendencies, and dragons and flying and moonlight beaches. I almost cursed. I'm sorry. You have an amazing, beautiful world here. Neverland exists the way it does as a result of all that innocent childhood dreaming. All of their most magical and creative thoughts before they grow up and it slips away. Insolent! Wendy, darling, you know, you know, you and your brothers are not the only ones who dream. Wendy was forced to her knees by the strength of the words. She covered her ears despite not actually hearing anything. When she managed to look up again, the rock formation had changed. There was something about it that looked different, and it appeared to be looming over her more. Some children are so twisted by hate from others they can dream of nothing but hate. Some children dream of going through a day without being whipped or beaten. Some children dream of nothing more than a full meal. They smile in their sleep as their dreams conjure something that would fill their bellies as if it were only real. Some dream that their parents are still alive, or at least that their ghosts come to visit. Some dream of still being able to play with their friends and go to school although they no longer can. This Neverland you see is the Neverland you and your brothers are used to. There are other parts of Neverland you never see, with no mermaids or fairies, only dishes of food and clean water and kindness, or beasts so horrible you would die upon viewing them. Silence filled the space in Wendy's ears and mind, and the first finished speaking. Her heart paused. Other children's dreams? The criminal, she murmured. But that wasn't her fault, was it? These other children weren't part of her Neverland, her world, were they? They weren't part of the London where she and John and Michael played in the nursery with Nana and cufflinks and perfume and Mr. and Mrs. Darling and tea and rain. But of course they were. Wendy knew that. She just didn't like to think about it. They were out there somewhere, at the edges or hidden in plain sight. Orphans, beggars, children with bruises, girls whose parents really did force them into arranged marriages, without even the choice of going to Ireland instead. Some of them may even have dreamed of a life where all they had to worry about was growing lonely and old in a large house where there was food and heat every day. Why else would they have dreamed up a Peter Pan to rescue them? I I just never even thought about that before. The first didn't say anything. I'm sorry. I didn't. I still don't know how Neverland works. Or my world either, I suppose. How much do you care about your world? Or this one? The mad pirate will destroy all of Neverland rather than simply quit it. When he has Peter Pan in his clutches to watch it all and weep. Yes, that's why I'm here. I don't see what I or my world has to do with Hook is the villain and star of so many of your tales. He was birthed from the tides of your world, and he will destroy ours. I didn't mean to. They were just stories. But you can stop him, can't you? We cannot stop this because of your world's hold over ours. He is of your making. What do you want me to do? Wendy cried desperately. I'll do it, whatever you ask. Nothing. Silence. Normally, she was not a girl prone to perspiring. She never moved much faster than a brisk walk and remained inside on the hottest days. Now she felt sweat break out across her brow and uncomfortably under her arms. But it wasn't from the desert heat. Should I leave now? She asked. Maybe she and the fairy should just go. Maybe the first were done with them. But it felt wrong to turn her back on these creatures, whatever they were, and walk away, rather than turning one's back on a king or queen. Were they done with her? Please, I'm sorry. I was so stupid. Neverland is a learning experience, she ventured, nervous and sweat. Oh my god. Coalescing into words that just poured out of her mouth. I came for adventure, perhaps wrongfully, but it's far more complicated than the place I dreamed of. Pirates don't seem to want to be pirates. Girls who have to hide their true selves to come here. Monsters who only eat fairies. Mermaids who will fight each other, tooth and claw over an apple. And Hook. Am I responsible for his doomsday visions? Neverland is a reflection of your world. Wendy jumped. She had no longer than she had no longer been expecting a response, much less one so calm. Are things broken here? Save this world, then go back to your own broken world and fix it. Perhaps we shall be mended as well. Me? Fix an entire world? I can't even fix my own situation at home. That's why I came here. Is escape to Neverland your only recourse for being made to grow up, for being sent away, for disagreeing with your parents? Is there something else you could do for yourself, for others like you, for others unlike you? This was not how Wendy expected the conversation to go. After her outburst, she expected irritation from the strange beings, maybe a boulder or two hurled at her for perceived insolence. Being squashed would have made more sense in these strange questions. I am no one. I can't do anything. I can't even disobey my father. Perhaps you should see if that really is true. Go quickly. Time is running out for Neverland and for Peter. There was a pause and a ripple in the atmosphere that Wendy realized meant a change in mood. Goodbye, human. Goodbye. Human, not grown up, not child, not hero, not villain. Goodbye. Pixie, not pixie, not human. Minnie blinked, and the monolith was gone. The others behind it in the landscape had also rearranged. There seemed to be fewer. When she left, I'm sorry. She let out a breath, not even realize she had been holding it. Tinkerbell decided that it was safe to flitter, and zoomed around like a nervous bee, keeping very close to her big friend. That was very interesting, educational. She finally found the right word. Terrifying. Tinkerbell nodded, swallowing. We really, we really have to get out of here and find Peter and get Hook immediately. When even the gods of a world are worried about his destruction. Well, it's serious indeed. And I know you think it's better to find Peter first and deal with his shadow and the pirates. But perhaps we really should go after the pirates now. I think we'll find them more easily at this point. What do you think? Tink? The little fairy wasn't paying attention. She tugged on Minnie's hair and pointed back the way they had come. Minnie looked very reluctantly, afraid of what could be there or rather what wouldn't. And she was right. Neverland was entirely gone. The desert extended for hundreds of miles in all directions, seamless and complete. Okay, so that is the end of that. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, that was a bit of a doozy. So, it seems Peter Pan is one elusive freaking pixie boy. uh, so, okay. So, my thoughts on what we just read. Um, it's the very fact that Peter Pan had met the first. Well, they didn't really say if he met them, if he actually met them or whatnot. Well, no. Sorry, I took that back. Um, it's it, it's just weird to think about it. So Peter Pan went to go see the first. They sent him away because they straight up said, "Your problems are not our problems. Go deal with it yourself." Like, okay. Ah, so, and that is crazy to me. But at the same time, it's not. Because if you remember from the actual movie, there are parts of Neverland that we don't see. We only see we only see the native tribe, the mermaids, and um that black the the Skull Island, and where the pirates are normally docked at. That those are the only parts that we see of Neverland. We never see beyond that. Even in the second animated movie, we still never see beyond that. And it doesn't get until we get to see Tinkerbell's movies that we actually see Pixie Hollow and where all the other fairies live at for the different seasons and all that. So it's great. It's interesting to me that the first say that this is her world, her Neverland that they are in right now. They are in Neverland, but they are in her Neverland. So that is the part that they are in. The part of Neverland that they're in is her Neverland, and that is crazy to me. Like, wow. So it really. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting sleepy. But anyway, so it's like the first were the of Neverland, but they were the ones to witness the development of Neverland because of human imagination and the reflection of their world onto Neverland and how it changes and affects Neverland. So I'm like, well, I'm just shocked. I'm just shocked. That is the end of that. I will not be reading chapter 22 tonight, but I will read it tomorrow at some point. I can't read it at night because I do have to work Wednesday, so it will not be a late night reading. Trying to think. Let's see. It won't be a late night reading. So I'll figure it out. But anyway, thank you all for listening or whatever you do with my readings. Stay hydrated. Have a good night. And don't dream of Neverland, apparently. Good night, y'all.